From PTC, and welcome to our next session, an engaging discussion on the digital transformation in Europe and current effects of COVID-19, moderated by Nico from Di².
Thank you for joining this year virtual, and we do here our Di² Digital Infrastructure Investment Session on digital transformation in Europe and current effects of COVID-19. That means we have a look on the sort of digital transformation effects on the one hand, and then look on the other how that might have been impacted the last, let's say, 6 to 9 months. And as we are from Di², also have our ambassador community, how we call it. We let them give their own views and presentations and collected a lot of opinions from them and focused there on 7 or 6 main topics, split one of them. And just to quickly go through, that means we will present sort of the opinions and the work of our ambassadors. And these are, as you can see here in the presentation, Gerd Simon, Paul Foley, Thomas Langer, also on the call, Thomas Köhler, another Thomas not on the call, Sandra Thomas, so we have Thomases massively, Wolfgang Kuhl, and Ralf Schütte. I would say our structure today is like we presenting, as said, the effects of sort of all the findings of our ambassadors and go through their papers. You're more than welcome to also have a look for the papers individually. They are available on our website. And we go through them and discuss them with our group here. And maybe we also do it quickly like an introduction. My name is Nico Grove. I'm also co-founder of Di². And we are running a platform for digital infrastructure investment as a non-profit organization, bringing digital infrastructure investors and those who build and actually plan it together. And next to me is on the call, on the presentation here, it's Lena. Maybe Lena, quickly introduction to you.
Of course. Hello, I'm Lena. I'm the senior project manager at Di² and at Kapena. Next to me is Thomas.
Yes, hi, I'm Thomas, and I'm also one of the co-founders of Di² and happy to be on this event. And I think next one is Helmut.
Yeah, hello, everybody. I'm colleague of Thomas and Nico, and happy to be here. So Nico, please go ahead.
Thank you. We are very happy to have you here too. So we're going to our presentation. Great. This one from Gerd Simon, he's sort of our data center expert. He had a look at sort of the current status of useful digital infrastructure in Germany. And maybe at the beginning, we already have to admit that for sure the US and other countries are leading, also China, in building up data centers. But this is not the only we are focusing on. We are also focusing on the entire digital infrastructure. We call it like fiber networks, data centers, mobile towers, sites, submarine cables, and all that stuff. For sure, no submarine cables in Germany. However, this is sort of what we name as digital infrastructure. What Gerd pointed out is, what Gerd pointed out is that we have sort of always path dependencies in that one. We are always referring to the effect that you have to build the infrastructure first, and then you are able to use it. And then in the next step, the society can benefit from these fundamental infrastructure foundations. And what he also points out is that the function of digital infrastructure is always on a path dependency. And one of the most important input factors there is a reliable power supply, and that also at these defined service locations, which in general is, again, like the data centers or the connection points between those networks. Yes, Lena, thank you. He also referred to the terms sort of what is the useful, and he regards useful infrastructure as something when it is available, works properly or reliable every day at given quality and whenever or wherever the user needs it. Useful infrastructure is also sort of a very important factor in competition in regions, as we currently see. I mean, for high reliable things like we're doing here, video communication, for example, ping times or latencies, that's a very important effect. So the near or the closer the data center is, the better you have sort of the connection times. And this is something where more infrastructure is again a good driver for economic growth, employment or unemployment rates, or lowering unemployment rates, and productivity of workforce, as we currently also use here and see in this current situation. And if you have that one, again, it can sort of impact then other areas of life, work, and also like social and other terms of daily life. Yeah, if now, I mean, we are doing that currently right now. If we would not have these digital infrastructures currently through that situation with COVID-19 again, yeah, we would have not even been able to cope with daily work, and would have not been better or worse, as we can also see from another perspective later from Paul Foley, presented by Lena, where we could even use homeschooling and stuff. And this is something, again, which was on the foundations of digital infrastructure. Current status in Germany, we wanted to give you an overview there. Doesn't look that well. On the other hand, that means there are a lot of opportunities for our investors. Currently, we are ranked on place 12 in EU comparison. I think 27 is that or something. It's not the member countries. I think they use that statistic. And we are not the leading sort of area when we talk in competition in digitalization. For sure, as named before, this is currently China and the US. And yeah, we have to invest massively in order not to fall behind. These are things he also worked out very well in his presentation, that on the one hand, as said, we have really to increase investment and build up of digital infrastructure. On the other hand, that's a good scenery for investors. However, if we wait even longer, we might miss also some market opportunities. Very important stuff is like currently economies of scale and scope, which you can really see in the area of hyperscalers. I mean, we all know the examples of Amazon and the Google servers, which can produce storage and calculation and processing at a much, much lower price than any of the competitors. And we also have to invest massively in data and cybersecurity. We will also have a look for that topic later. We have a lot of funding here available, so that means also for the manufacturers and stuff, this is a very good sort of opportunity to come out of this weak position, maybe stronger in the future. And again, this event showed us, especially also at the beginning, we will see these figures, that we had a massive effect also of data traffic and stuff during COVID-19. Lena, and unmute.
Of course, I will take over and I will present Paul Foley's paper on internet use infrastructure and COVID-19. Basically, Paul Foley and his team, they were doing they were writing a couple of papers during the European lockdowns in March and April about the traffic increase and the speed and effects on speed and infrastructure in Europe and North America. The paper he wrote for Di² provides an overview of the impacts he observed in those papers. And basically, there are three different sections that I will focus on. It's the traffic volumes, access speed, and internet infrastructure. And in the final section of his paper, he provides an overview of how data travels on the internet and how data travels between countries, especially. I will not have time to go into detail in all of those analysis that Paul Foley did with his team, but I will give you a quick overview about all of them. And if you have further questions, just reach out to Paul Foley and he will be happy to answer your questions. So looking at the traffic volumes, we see in the top of the slide a graph with the average weekly traffic in Madrid. we can see that before lockdown, average weekly traffic was around 360 gigabit per second. And then the red line indicates the lockdown in the middle of March. We can see around 30% increase to 473 just a week after lockdown. And afterwards, it stays on a high level until lockdown is eased in the end of April. Actually, like one reason is the ease of the lockdown, that weekly traffic is afterwards going down rapidly. But it's also interesting that usually traffic volumes are cyclical. So usually traffic volumes go down in summer and they increase in winter. So it's interesting to see that still, even though it's summertime, it takes until June until reaching the pre-lockdown level of 360 gigabyte per second. Now, if the graph only shows up until the end of July, but if we would continue the graph until now, we would see an increase again because of the winter increase that always takes place in traffic volumes. Now, of course, this 30% increase in average weekly traffic had an impact on speed. So if we look at the speed statistics, if you look at the graph on the left, there you see the percentage changes in speed on the most frequent landing web pages. So in bold on the right, you see figures that show then the average speed before lockdown. And then the colorful bars, they show you how the speed in comparison to before lockdown. So for example, to make it more easy to understand, if you look at the Amazon bars, you see a minus 80% speed in comparison to 5th of March, which was the week before lockdown. And also Amazon, it's curious that Amazon does not recover until after lockdown. So speed remained much slower than the time before the country shut down. The same also applies to Facebook and Twitter with minus 58 and minus 43% respectively. But we can see here that those two platforms, they actually managed to recover. And in the last week before opening up the country, they have already a higher speed than before lockdown. So they somehow managed to get rid of the problems and to get to speed up again their platforms. What is really curious is actually YouTube, Netflix, Instagram, and Skype, because those platforms, they are highly depending on video content, which of course is highly depending on speed, because video content cannot be displayed without interruptions if there's not enough speed to display those videos without interruptions. So for them, it was crucial to speed up their platforms again. And actually they managed already in the second week after lockdown to make their platforms, even the connection speed, even faster than before lockdown. So here they somehow managed in comparison to Amazon, who did not. Also, it's curious to see that connection speeds vary in different countries. So if you look at the map on the right, there we have a map of Europe, and we see that the connection speed to the three main websites, so Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. And we see that the speed is actually fastest for Luxembourg and the Netherlands, which are in Central Europe. If you go further away from those two countries, speed actually increases a lot, so speed gets slower. For example, you see Croatia, the dark red spot in the southeast, and Portugal, the dark red spot in the southwest, which are further away from Netherlands and Luxembourg, and also they are much slower, have much slower connection speeds. This also reflects the data cloud center locations, which you can see on the left, because they are all located in Central Europe and Northern Europe, which is probably related to the connection speeds to those web pages. Another analysis Paul Fowler and his team did was the data flows, looking at the data flows between countries in the European Union. So here he was only focusing on business data, and he was looking how much data is coming into a country and how much data is going out. So he was actually seeing that there are some differences in those countries. For example, in France, much more data is going out than is coming in, like a 1.7%. In the UK, you can see the opposite. So 1.7% more data is coming in than what is going out, like only looking at business data. Of course, that leaves somehow the question open, where is data going and where is data coming from? So another analysis he was focusing on is looking at those data streams. For example, here, the traffic of France. And he was modeling where data is going to and where data is coming from 100 sites within Europe and hourly traffic. So he created a dashboard with all those different analysis and graphics, and which can be accessed by contacting him directly. And so he was showing all different countries and all speeds that you can find. Yeah, so Paul Foley did the dashboard with all those analysis and even more of them that I could not show right now. If you want to collaborate or access the dashboard, please reach out to him directly. And if you have also any further questions, you can either reach out to us or to him. Now I would give over to Thomas.
Yes, thanks very much, Lena. So what we did over summertime was to have a look at recent trends that have appeared across Europe over the past few years. And I think what we can say is it's clearly marked by two major themes. And theme one is consolidation, and theme two is separation of network layers. And what that means in practice, what we can observe in the telecom market in Europe, and what it could or maybe does not mean for the US, I will explain to you on the following slides. So we've seen quite a number of deals in the European telecom market. And clearly, there's a strong movement away from old copper technology to a major upgrade to fiber to the building or fiber to the home. Not the least because of now a more forceful policy scheme by the EU, which clearly gives a benefit to technologies which are able to deliver gigabit speeds to households. And what we can also see is that as a consequence, it's clearly becoming a major issue for national incumbents or larger operators like Vodafone, who started with a mobile business and now in many markets are cable players. So we see new players coming to the market, which are really incentivized by this overbuild opportunity that we currently see, because the big guys, the big elephants in the room, they are capital constrained because they do not have to cope with more competition on the fixed net front. They also have to invest massively in 5G, be it licenses or be it infrastructure. So that opens up a nice window of opportunity for new players with a strong financial background. And what adds up is clearly, and that is not only based on anecdotal evidence, COVID has really shown that it's a positive factor for demand. So sign-up rates are going up when smaller operators are doing their pre-marketing stuff. I think it's really common across Europe. It's now easier to get contracts signed by customers who want to switch from copper to fiber connections. So if this is true for the whole of Europe, and on the day of this recording, we just had a news out for London where one infrastructure fund announced to invest another $1 billion. We had a announcement of a M&A transaction in the northern part of Germany from an infrastructure fund managing 30 billion. And we've really seen a string of these deals in Europe, and now more and more also in Germany. The important bit here is that the market structure in Germany is a bit special. So we have a number of utilities which are active in this market, and you see the names here from EWE, who has closed a cooperation agreement with Deutsche Telekom. We have E.ON, probably you know better known from its activities in the energy markets. We have TÜGA and we have EnBW, and all those entities have developed strategies how to participate in the rollout of broadband fiber networks. While this seems to be a nice opportunity, I think the big guys, the regional utilities, they have a challenge because they still struggle to define their strategy, what kind of role they want to assume in these markets. As you can imagine, these are larger conglomerates with many subsidiaries and with many different ideas developing in this subsidiaries. So we cannot really say that there is one common idea how to develop this market. Sometimes it's based on a NetCo only approach, sometimes it's NetCo and OpCo, and then you also have the occasional idea that it will be utilities who will develop the next big thing in the services market. And I think it's fair to say that is maybe not the most likely scenario. So, and on top of this, as I just said before, all the big players in the German market, companies that share the vast majority of all service contracts, and that is Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone, Telefonica Germany, and United Internet, they face strategic challenges because either they are capital constrained or they simply don't have a business model which is based on high capex. So now when we look at this, and we can ask the question, what does this mean for the United States? And I think there are a few aspects maybe I would like to highlight. First, just to dilute any kind of concerns you might have, this is not do it like the Swedes approach. I think the Swedish market really showed a way that the separation of layers, NetCo, OpCo, and ServCo, could be a way forward, but we are not proposing or even suggesting that the US or any other market should follow the Swedish example. What is more important is that the example currently in Germany shows that there is now a market model how to offer a value proposition based on separation. And when we look at the US, we can count more than 300 municipal networks in the US, which I think is a very strong number. However, the issue is it's still very small networks, very small deployments, so lacking scale. And so far, at least from our desktop research, the separation of the different layers is a bit difficult in the US market because you don't have that independent service players which can run services on third-party infrastructure. You can also ask the question, why isn't big tech, so the Googles, the Apples, the Microsofts, not coming to the market with their own internet service? You could think about an Amazon Prime Internet or an Apple Connect. Google Fiber was a different story because it was very much based on infrastructure. And I think there is clearly some benefit for involving local or regional utilities because they know how to dig up roads, they know how to manage passive infrastructure. But it seems to be the case that it's quite difficult to coordinate these different interests, and big tech could be a big story, but of course these tiny deployments, tiny rollouts, they do not really support these companies which have business models based on monster scale. It's just not there in the US. What we find interesting, and we can only tell from our own experience, our commercial activities in the German market, investing private money in those smaller networks, using an intelligent framework to cooperate with local utilities or even larger utilities, that could actually be a nice business for investors, for operators, and also for consumers. But somehow Wall Street is more focusing on big M&A in the mobile market, more on consolidation in the cable market, as people on Hawaii will probably know. So I think Wall Street thinks there is more money to be made in other segments. We can only say, I think this is a fantastic market. And having been an equity investor in Frontier Communications and still sitting on a bit of a bond portfolio in Frontier bonds, I think that giving a positive view on private companies does not necessarily mean that they will succeed. So to sum it up, I think maybe it's time to reconsider investment in smaller operations, purely private or in cooperation with local utilities. I think it could be to the benefit of everybody in the market. And I think that concludes my presentation.
Perfect. So, Nico.
Very good. Then we have another ambassador, Thomas Köhler. He had a look at cybersecurity for the telecommunications sector here in Europe. And maybe we start, as we're talking of elephants, we can talk of the elephant in the room first. Yeah, we have here the massive differentiations or differences with differentiations too with the vendors, but differences with Huawei, how the different member states handle Huawei, like same in the US, some block them, some leave them in their networks, others are not. On the other hand, we also have to observe if it might be the case. On the other hand, Huawei is currently highly cooperative and also lets third parties look into its core components and even the source code, which has not even provided by all manufacturers on other equipment. So that's a sort of very weird situation. Latest development was especially also in UK, where Huawei was banned, not due to the security reasons, for sure maybe too, but the reason was due to the patent restrictions held by US companies in order that this equipment, if it's in a network, cannot be maintained later on. So that's a very complicated issue in the meanwhile. But now coming from security, another thing is then again safety. And this is also related to cyber attacks. Telecom companies also own, operate and control for sure the infrastructure. And also access to cloud services, which play in the meanwhile a crucial role for the functioning of not only the corporate, but also of the social and digital world, even of maybe here private and business life again. And now we have from different kind of hackers objectives, which can be manifold, from stealing or even getting to data, fraud or holding of communication metadata, and even sort of get hold of surveillance data on targets. And that is what is all going over these communication networks now. And yeah, we also could see there on one hand that we have their security breaches, like we have even several security breaches on the largest Austrian telecommunication operator beginning of that year, and yeah, had even to fight off unwanted guests in their networks, and this is all we can observe. Others get offline, and due to the introduction of 5G, that might get even more crucial to have security and safety in communication networks as a central element in communication infrastructure. especially for 5G, this will be responsible for or set of as the backbone of critical applications, including not just industrial sites or control systems, but also for the often named example of autonomous driving. Here, for sure, any security breach will have massive impact and consequences from starting from several financial losses, but also danger to life and other areas of daily work. And that also means there are new dangers. On the other hand, that also opens up new opportunities. And this is something where we can, Lena, thank you, where we can also have a look at the telecommunication industry as from its own, but on the other hand, also on third-party service providers, which can sort of position in these opportunities and provide services for cybersecurity. A very good example would be like the old telecommunication infrastructure companies here, Deutsche Telekom, BT, in US it would be AT&T. They would be in a very good position to provide those security services. However, it looks again like in these markets, they are overrun by third-party security experts and service providers. And therefore, this is where an entire industry has just started and will also have a look for securing and safeguarding future and current digital infrastructure. And yeah, this is something where we are currently also, like everywhere on this world, in a trade-off between also now when it comes to data protection and data collection. On one hand, it might be good for health and safety. On the other, it might be, again, fraud if it comes to our personal data. And this is something which is another perspective, which you also touched in that paper. But summing that up again, we have these for sure maybe or increasing dangers of cybersecurity and safety, and on the other hand, again, then the opportunities. And yeah, we should discuss that later if it's opening up that market again for third parties, and it will be maybe software companies which sort of dominate that in the future. Thanks.
So the next paper was from Sandra Thomas, and she was writing a paper on digital infrastructure in comparison to digital learning and digital education. Basically, Thomas, I will present the 4 challenges, and maybe then I will hand over to you. So the 4 major challenges Sandra discovered in her paper was, first of all, the broadband access, because that's still not ensured everywhere. Also, the rollout of software is still in the process, since especially in digital learning, everyone needs to use the same software in order to collaborate and communicate. So there, in the beginning, especially when COVID appeared, there was no communication tools used for everyone in institutions like universities, for example. Also, the rules and regulations for digital teaching and learning have to be adapted. For example, how to make sure that the obligation to attend schools, how this is managed and how this is verified. And also, of course, lecturers need to develop their competencies, and they also need training to adapt their methods and materials, since digital learning is not at all the same than offline learning. So here are 4 major challenges. And also in the school setting, she's pointing out there's one additional challenge, that hardware is not always available everywhere. So that's an additional roadblocker that, of course, has to be tackled in the beginning in order to make sure that everyone can take part in online learning. But of course, on the other hand, there are also lots of opportunities for digital education. So, for example, like especially for universities or for higher education in general, there's education gets new audiences from all over the world, because classes are opening up for everyone. So it's not limited anymore to people who are attending in presence, but anyone all over the world can attend to those classes and to master programs, for example, or in general to education. That also means from an institutional perspective that a huge market potential is arising for students, but as well for lecturers. Because now the market is not anymore the market of one country, of one region, but it's like a huge market from all over the world. Sandra was pointing out one positive example in Germany of a dual degree bachelor program that has managed to adapt to the COVID situation immediately, since they've already been running online classes. At least a significant share of their classes were already online teaching before COVID. So they had already all the credentials and everyone knew how to access their platforms and communication tools and all those challenges that I've mentioned before. They were already solved. So they were able to switch to a full online program within only 3 days after announcing the lockdown. And so everyone could complete their degrees with good learning results and as planned in 2020. And especially graduates also pointed out that it was a valuable experience of e-learning as a preparation for their future jobs. So even though there are lots of challenges in e-learning and they have to be tackled, but there are also lots of opportunities. And also in, for example, in science, the collaboration that can take place now via internet, that's and via e-learning, that's a great opportunity.
Okay, coming to digital work now. There we have papers from Wolfgang, and later on following by Wolfgang Kohl, and later on following by Roland Schütte. And there we're focusing on 2 areas of digital work. The one is here sort of a company, and the other one more a general perspective. Virtual meetings, for sure, like everywhere, have been become more intense, more normal, and they have been used also in the meanwhile also in private areas. And for sure, it was really rapidly now also adapted by a lot of companies. On the other hand, we saw already the broadband effects to the networks, to traffic effects, and even companies were upgrading really quickly in-house sort of networks when they saw or used even more VPN services, bought the licenses and all that required stuff. And we also had to also see in normal call areas, call equipment, that we needed there more hardware. This shows us we need in the future also there more flexible sort of architecture, maybe even not just from the hardware, but also from a software perspective. And regarding the infrastructure, we now see that we need additional capacity because remote working participants, if they first use a VPN and then also use corporate data on parallel, the traffic is getting in and out of the VPN company connections double than before. Yes, Lena, thank you. Second one. Yeah, when looking at the statistics of here our German offices, it is sort of recommended that Cisco, for example, uses 3 to 5 megabit per user. However, we see in the meanwhile also like people switching off their video in the meantime in order to save bandwidth, that these which are speaking maybe have a better chance in audio quality. And yeah, we also see that the technical fitness of the employees is maybe in some areas not enough and has to be improved. That's in different areas for sure. In the working conditions, again, different. That means like we have it more in our areas where we are technology fans, that is working. However, you have other areas which have not a lot to do in more, let's say, social also areas. So we need there more training. We also need cultural change and even for sure, like always, management from the top. Other things he had a look at is that we need the sort of a cultural change also for working with digital natives and those ones which are the immigrants, so they sort of work better together. And that's sort of the overall view of Wolfgang. If we look there from Ralf Schütte's perspective, we there have seen that the use of home offices increased for sure a lot. However, we have also seen other areas now where we have massively sort of suffered from just being at the home office. Examples here are onboarding processes. That means like getting new employees into the company, which doesn't work that well. And the other thing is like you have these normal meetings in between the company, yeah, where you have not the normal sort of surrounding. It's that special, let's say, social framework you also need in a classical office perspective. We also see in our personal experience areas where we also need, on one hand, personal meetings in order maybe to close deals. And on the other hand, we can handle a lot of stuff also hybrid when travel time, like in the past, would take too long and people maybe are known to each other. And that's also one of his theses. He says that, like we all do in the meanwhile, this hybrid work or hybrid way of meeting and not meeting will sort of continue. However, trying after that COVID stuff that we can again focus on elements which require personal attendance, and on the other hand, those are not. Then we have to focus on the areas where this is needed, and then we have to create them again, like my example from before, when we need these normal office floor talks or kitchen talks, and that has to be then created artificially, and that's something we also can discuss then quickly about. Exactly. Effects of a dynamic working organization is on current technical requirements. We have to increase there massively those workers which are on the one hand not equipped with equipment, on the other hand also, like said before, with the working skills, and we need the technical infrastructure, especially like we see it suffering here currently in schools. Also means also private life and workspace, and have a look that we create also these spaces a bit differently than maybe before. That might be our next step also in co-working again, where you have in sort of areas in the city special places for that. And especially for Germany, we need a much faster rollout of high bandwidth capacity digital networks, especially on fiber. And we have to again hinder the digital divide and even work against that one, that we can create that digital working equipment. That were sort of Ralf's important findings. Yeah, that's what we have to do for sure. If you have questions here, please reach out to us, info@di². And now we still have a couple of minutes left in order to talk about these findings. Maybe from a personal perspective, if any one of us there sees something which he or her expected themselves, yeah, and this is something we could, or I suggest we could do in the given time now. Any ideas like from you, like the traffic thing? Like we see that. I can start with an example also in our Zoom conferences. Even if the people have a high capacity maybe network at home, we still see they're suffering either from a system perspective or even maybe from a backbone perspective. We see the limitations, and that's something we even have to invest again more in the networks. That's a personal example. Others, it's like we had also providers offline, big providers, and then sort of the world stood still for a couple of hours. Maybe here in Europe yesterday, yeah, or entire world. I think one provider was that. We even see that in other areas. Yeah, that's personal experiences. Guys, any ideas of you guys?
Yeah, maybe I can continue on that one. On the macroeconomic situation, I think COVID will have 2 or 3 main impacts. First of all, it's really also a booster. We saw already upfront a few trends, which is now popping up much faster than in COVID times than ever. Like Nico already pointed out, for example, the video calls, video conferences, etc., which also means the good side on it is the normal traffic jams goes down, which is also a huge impact. Secondly, what I personally feel, travel times was a lot of not so productive times normally. But on the other side, it gives you also some time for thinking and strategic thoughts. Now we are more or less every hour one video conference. So it's really much more dense than ever, which means you have to take your own freedom and say, I have to be out 1, 2, 3, 4 hours to have some strategic thoughts. This is for me, my personal learnings and lessons from this COVID and home working time.
I also maybe want to add one aspect to the story, and that has to do with the developments in school and university education and doing work from home. And I think maybe, you know, sometimes these worlds can collide, because I think for many households, you don't have that many rooms, you don't have that many computers at home. So I think for you know, quite a number of families, it's not so easy to organize the day-to-day life. And as a father of 2 girls or young women, maybe just one thought on the situation in schools and universities. So I think it's fair to say that the situation in schools in Germany generally is slightly suboptimal, to put it mildly. So it's one thing to improve the situation in terms of infrastructure, broadband connection for schools, and iPads and what have you for pupils. But if you don't think about new concepts, how to teach and how to learn, I think it will not be hugely effective. And I think that is the situation in Germany and probably also in many other European markets. In universities, and that is, I have to say, only my impression, I think the situation is different. And why is this? I think as soon as a university has some sort of a computer science department, and you have some research assistants who are somehow into this new digital lifestyle thing, I think new concepts of teaching and learning are adopted more quickly and more easily. And I think that is what at least I can observe here in my family. So what is the conclusion? I think maybe also in schools, maybe, you know, let the kids take over, you know, maybe this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, how very young people can take an active role, how to learn and maybe how to teach also one another. And, you know, don't let Netflix just be the tranquilizer for pupils who have to stay at home.
Lena, any experience otherwise?
Yeah, I can just agree to Thomas. I mean, I've studied now a master's program totally online, and before I've studied a master's offline. And the experience as a university student is probably, I've never studied online in a school, but it's probably totally different, because in university, it's more the flexibility that counts. Because now, for example, working full time and studying a second master's is, so you need to arrange your time freely. You need to be flexible. Also, like watching videos on demand and asking questions more informed, more being able to I mean, it needs a lot of motivation, of course, and and really following up. But in this case, it's really nice to have this form to sign up for any class all over the world, to go to any university you ever wanted to go, and sign up for those classes. But I also have one more point that I feel that is not as great studying online, for example, in comparison to offline. That's like the connections to the fellow students. Because in an offline university, you usually sit next to someone else, and then you have discussions around the topics, which do not take place as equivalently online. So I think, and I feel that also needs to change a little in the future. So yeah, for example, in group assignments and more group interactions with students. So yeah, so that there's more connection and discussion with other people, since everyone is watching the content at different times on different places. That it's quite hard to organize those interactions, but I guess that will be the way in the future.
Perfect. So I think that was a good closing word. Hence, if there are no other comments or something, I would suggest we leave as suggested before. A couple of minutes left for internal discussion. We try to be online, one of us, and hand you over to the questions and try to handle them. Otherwise, please, again, either info.di² or .eu or reach to us directly. Yeah, thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for discussing that, and have a great PTC.